Okay, everybody, hello. Welcome to the 4th episode of Here Comes the Spider Cast. As usual, I'm your co-host, Michael.
And I'm Josh, and today we're going to be looking at the Spider-Man comics from October 1980. I think we're going to start off with talking about Amazing Spider-Man number 209.
You know what's funny, though, is before you get to that, I actually noticed something today as I was getting ready for today's episode. We are committed to reviewing every Spider-Man comic from every month, ever. Right. But you realize that there was technically another Spider-Man comic published during this time that we completely forgot about.
Really?
Are you aware of the existence of Spidey Super Stories?
No, actually, I don't think I am.
Because when I was a kid, Spider-Man is the first comic book character that I was obsessed with, where I was like, I have to get every single comic he's ever appeared in.
Right.
And you discover Myrtle Team-Up, then Marvel Tales, then whatever, Web of Spider-Man. And then a couple years later, I'm like, what, Spidey Super Stories? Well, anyway, it turns out this was a comic co-produced by Marvel Comics and the Electric Company. So there used to be a TV show called the Electric Company, and I've never seen it, but older fans will know about this. And I'm not sure what it was, but it was like a kids' variety show, and this was the first appearance of Spider-Man in live action, and he was actually an actor dressed up as Spider-Man.
Huh.
And he would like interact with kids, but he would never talk. He would only have, I think, speech bubbles or thought bubbles.
Oh, wow.
And it was also one of the very first ever acting jobs for Morgan Freeman, of all people. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah, so like the month that we're reviewing right now, it would have been Spidey Super Stories number 49. And it's actually written by Stephen Grant and drawn by Win Mortimer from Superman fame. But I will not increase our burden of reading more Spider-Man comics, only because these are not in continuity and they're directed at a younger audience. So maybe another, Spider Cast for another day, but not today. So now that that's out of the way, yeah, let's get to Amazing. Talk to me. Let's talk about Amazing Spider-Man 209.
Yeah, so Amazing Spider-Man 209, we see the return of Kraven the Hunter, and he's teamed up with Calypso,
yeah.
Yeah, I forgot her name briefly. And it's kind of a bizarre story I found at the beginning. Kraven has some sort of plan, but it's not exactly clear what it is, with this like Noah's Ark that's full of animals of two. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't really explain his plan too much, but it's something to do with luring Spider-Man in. And it kind of all goes awry, and the animals get loose, and Spider-Man has to go and save the animals while also confronting Kraven the Hunter.
I gotta say, this could be the worst issue we've read yet,
yeah.
In some ways. Like, the motivation is so weak. Like, basically, Kraven is sort of practicing hunting or whatever. He's like throwing his spear.
Right.
And Calypso is sort of taunting him. But it's such a weak... It's one of those things where I guess there's like a thing in storytelling, like, why now? And it's like, really, this is where she chooses to have this conversation about sort of taunting him that, well, if you really cared, you'd go hunt him down, like, And it's just sort of like, why at this point, why did she choose now? So it's really weak motivation. Mm-hmm. And then it gets to, like you said, this whole thing about him on this boat, and it gets very confusing because here's the thing. The art by, is it Alan Wise?
Mm-hmm.
Alan Wise. He's obviously a technically good artist, but he's one of those guys who, in my opinion, is not appropriate to comics. He's just too focused on realism, and he is not focused enough on storytelling.
Right.
And so there's this weird... Sorry, go ahead.
I agree with that. I think that his art is really good, but it's not always great for storytelling.
Yeah.
But I will say that I think the one thing he is good at, storytelling-wise, is those really dramatic moments with, like, the close-up of people's faces.
Okay, yeah.
There were a couple of moments in here that I really loved, particularly on page 3 of digital, I think 2 of the original. About the middle of the page, there's this, like, really close-up of Kraven's face, and he's like cast in this dramatic yellow light that's almost like coming from beneath him, and his face is like cast in shadow, and he's kind of, talking about about his hate for Spider-Man, and then Calypso's kind of in the corner and kind of downplays him, and you know, kind of jokes about him monologuing. And then even, you know, the next page, he's, you know, recalling his last encounter with Spider-Man, and it again has this really dramatic lighting while he's like thinking and recalling what happened last. So I think that there's a couple of moments where it really works to kind of have this like melodramatic tension.
Sure.
But for the most part, yeah, I think some of the staging doesn't really work, and it might be he might be trying a little too hard to be realistic, like you were saying.
Well, I think with a lot of these artists, and I'll go even as far as to include Alex Ross in this category, which, you know, everyone loves Alex Ross. I mean, I like him too, but the thing with these types of artists is because they're so focused on like realism, and I mean, I'm sure that they've learned to draw by, you know, looking at models, and they probably use models a lot for their stuff. Like you said, he's great at close-ups. He's great at expression and detail because that's probably his specialty, right? But it's almost like when you pull the camera back, things get awkward because it's like you mentioned staging. It's like he doesn't quite know where to put people in the frame, and there's like weird scenes that we'll talk about later on of people running down alleys, and it's almost like he's great just at portraits, you could say, like a facial portrait and body, but like once people start running around and, you know, doing different things, it sort of falls apart a bit, you know?
So I actually have a question about Alan Wise. Is he? I'm not super familiar with him, but is he more of a cover artist?
I don't know.
Or
I mean, sure? He's one of those. Yeah, he's one of those names I definitely came across a lot during this era, but I don't know much about him. I'll do a quick Google as we're talking.
Because I feel like, because I kind of like the cover. It's a nice pose, and it does have a lot of detail, but because I'm assuming they would get a little bit more time on the cover, it works better than a lot of the rest of the comic. So I'm wondering if he is somebody that's more of a artist who does covers rather than entire issues, and that's maybe where the downfall kind of came from.
Could be. I'm actually looking through his bibliography, and apparently he worked on Tom Strong, which I was a huge... Did you ever read Tom Strong?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's Alan Moore's like tribute to sort of Silver Age superheroes.
Oh, okay, interesting.
It's really, really good, like endlessly rereadable. I absolutely love it. I'm skimming through his work, and I mean, he's kind of one of those guys that did a little bit of everything.
Right, he kind of just bounced around from...
Yeah, I don't see any really long runs on anything, so he's probably just one of those guys who was just around.
Right.
I'm not saying he's not a good artist. He's definitely good, but
he is, yeah, for sure.
He's just not maybe appropriate for this, but...
but and, like, you know, I wonder if he got his own run of something, if you know, would have been able to kind of slip into that story and that art and kind of feel more comfortable, and he would get better over time, and maybe that's, you know, something that kind of leads to it feeling a little bit less put together and a little bit more sloppy at some points.
Sure, that could totally be it. Yeah, that could totally be it. As far as the storytelling, there's a weird part that it was kind of good but kind of not good. It's on digital page 6.
Right.
And it's okay. So Craven's just got off the boat. Sorry, on page 5, Spider-Man's looking at the boat. He sees the animals getting off. Now Craven comes off. So then back on page 6, it's like, okay, so now we've got a shot of Spider-Man swinging away, which it's kind of, again, not a great action shot, but there's sort of action lines to show that he's swinging away. And then this is what it says. Gazing at the red and blue figure, Craven murmurs, could he possibly know that we've entered the country? Could he be on his way to notify the authorities? Then he says out loud, no, that would not be his style. Calypso? And it's all black behind him. Apparently Calypso's completely disappeared, and now she's got, you know, instituting her own little plan where she's unlocking the cage that these animals are in to let them go loose. Then the next panel, the animals are out of their cages, stampeding, run. Nearby, the cry is heard. Like, this page, to me, is a mess.
Yeah, because, it is all over the place. Yeah,
like Craven's running down the aisle, Calypso's now behind him, smiling, and then it's like, again, if you were to take all the dialogue out of this page and all the captions and look at it, what in tarnation is going on? You know what I mean?
Yeah, so, I completely agree with you.
I did like the fact that they kind of incorporated the weird shot of Spider-Man swinging away into what he was thinking. Like, he's suspicious, but Spider-Man doesn't actually know. That's kind of cool. But everything else is a mess. You know? And then the next page is this weird shot of Kraven running around an alley, and it just... ugh. I don't know.
I mean, even leading into kind of what happens next with this, like, supermodel on the building.
Right.
Which is completely bizarre. Might I add?
Yep.
It felt really out of place. This this bald eagle that got loose from this arc swooped down and picked up a supermodel that was being photographed on a rooftop and threw her off the building, and Spider-Man comes and saves her. So even when it goes into here, where the action should be really clear, it still feels kind of muddled and it jumps around so much.
Right.
So
and, it's funny because I just finished the other day reviewing the Galactus trilogy by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby.
Okay.
Like FF. And my God, I mean, I know there's people out there that don't appreciate Kirby, but you want to talk about clear storytelling. Like, it's a completely separate art form from like illustration or whatever. He's effortlessly perfect. It's just amazing. So anyway, I don't want to get on a Kirby kick, but anyway, it's just on my mind because he's so good,
Yeah.
So anyway, so then this issue, I don't know what to say about it. Like, there's a lot of more taunting from Calypso, and then we touch in, we always kind of check in on Peter's personal life with his, I guess he's got this new kind of boss.
Right.
Who's basically admitting that he wants to deliberately falsify
photographs,
like
they can
scandal
some teachers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever. I mean, I'm sure maybe that'll lead somewhere. I doubt it. But then we get this really awkward subplot with Spider-Woman.
Right. And I thought that it was interesting that they did kind of show a little bit of Spider-Woman, but it didn't really connect.
No.
Like, it felt disjointed. And when I saw the page initially, I'm like, oh, cool. They're going to tie it into the Marvel Team-Up from last week or from last month.
Sure.
Because that one was with Hulk and Spider-Woman. So I thought that maybe there was a reason why they had this gap where it wasn't Spider-Man, and they brought in Spider-Woman to kind of bring you into this story, but still, no, it really had nothing to do with it.
Nope, nothing.
No. They must have been really trying to push the Spider-Woman comic.
Sure.
Because they even say in here, in case you're wondering, the foregoing vignette featured Spider-Woman, who appears monthly in her own magazine.
Yeah.
So I wonder if it was struggling maybe at the time, and they were really trying to push this character and trying to drive an audience towards her comic.
I think you're totally right. I mean, I think Spider-Woman only lasted maybe 30 issues, so yeah, it probably was struggling. Yeah. Which, I mean, it does irritate me a little bit, but at the end of the day, I mean, it's a commercial comic, and what do you expect, right?
For sure, yeah.
That's fine. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, but so anyway, this story, it doesn't really get much better. I mean,
no.
Spider-Man makes his way to the Museum of Natural History and ends up sort of getting into this fight with Kraven, and there's not really much to it. It's a big fight scene.
Right.
And then once again, I got to say, Denny O'Neil, I think this is the third or fourth time he's done it. There is no ending to this story.
Yeah, exactly. I was waiting for you to say this because oh my goodness. Again, it just ends.
Yeah, they're in the middle of a fight. The next blow landed is going to end this party, so I'm going to hit first. Such is the force of Spider-Man's punch that Kraven is sent sprawling into an unexpected reception. Of course, the police are all there waiting to arrest him, and then Spider-Man just runs away. So once again, not only is this like the third or fourth time that Denny O'Neil has just like ran out of space, but I think it's at least the second time it's ended by just a punch, hasn't it? Right?
Yeah.
Pretty bad.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer because again, I like to see when superheroes and supervillains use their strengths against each other, where this just really felt like another punching match. which is
right, like
never
and when
fun.
And when you say strengths, you mean like sort of like what are Spider-Man's abilities that make him unique? What makes him smart? Not just punch, right?
Right. And Kraven's ability to hunt. So if you know, if maybe Spider-Man tried to do something to kind of get the upper hand on Kraven, but you know he knows how to hunt in the dark or something like that, or you know, like I don't know, it's something to kind of add to the fact that it's Kraven the Hunter. What makes him so much harder to defeat than anybody else? Like
exactly.
I don't know. So yeah, this issue kind of fell flat to me.
Very.
Yeah. And which sucks too, because I saw Kraven the Hunter and I thought, oh, this might be good, and
sure,
unfortunately not.
Well, and like I mentioned, there is that website Spidey Kicks Butt, and the creator of that website has said that this era of Denny O'Neil Amazing Spider-Man is among the worst in the character's history, and I'm kind of starting to see why. You know,
right?
It's just nothing memorable. Like, I mean, I think we're 3 or 4 issues into his run, and yeah, it's pretty bad so far. So, but now.
Oh, actually, real quick before we move on.
No problem.
I just want to say that I thought that the writing even was a little weird in this one too. At
like
times.
The dialogue.
Yeah, especially with Peter Parker and Deb.
Okay.
It didn't feel like it was Peter Parker talking.
Yes, actually, I made a note that he was like a dick, right?
Yeah, he was a complete dick. Like, it sounded like it was written for, like, Stark or somebody that was kind of like the cocky, arrogant,
yes.
It just was not him. Like, there, at one point, she's talking about how her uncle's being threatened by these thugs, and if I know that it might be a lot to ask, but could you help my uncle? He's in danger. No can do. I think this is exactly what he says. Is no chance, Deb. Sorry, and then runs off. He's like, anyways, I don't have time between the globe and studying and teaching. I just don't have time, and then leaves.
That's exactly it. I could not believe that was in there. It was horrible.
Yeah, that's just not Peter Parker. It just felt wrong.
Absolutely, I'm with you on that. That it was just, and again, why is the editor not catching this? Right. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just very bizarre.
I'm just checking my notes to see if there's anything else. Oh yeah, I've got it. Ending is shit. That's about all I've got here. There was another note. There's a point where I forgot about this little subplot where Kraven thought that Spider-Man released the animals.
Oh, right.
Yeah, like it's just like why? I guess it's one of those things of why introduce that complication? Like why even?
Yeah, it felt very convoluted and weird.
Yeah, like, before our combat begins, can you offer a reason for releasing the animals this afternoon? I don't know what you're talking about. You deny the human explanation? And it's just like, if you could just simply cut that out, it would just make things, it would streamline things, right?
Yeah, like this, doesn't he already have a reason to hate Spider-Man? Right. Like, he already does hate him and want to hunt him and kill him. What's the point in adding this? Like, what does it add to the story? And the answer is nothing. Like, this whole animal arc doesn't even really make sense.
Nope.
Like, it doesn't add anything to the story.
Absolutely not. Nope, you're right.
So
basically just a bad issue all around.
Yeah, I agree.
Unfortunately. So now we're going to move on to a slightly better issue, and that's Amazing Spider-Man Annual 14. And this is still written by Denny O'Neil, surprisingly, but it's drawn by Frank Miller. And I actually just recently reviewed an early issue of Daredevil by Frank Miller.
Yeah.
And he's one of those guys, I've never really sure how I feel about his art, because I came in as a fan of his writing first. And then I got exposed to his art on Dark Knight Returns and then Daredevil. But I guess... So Mike Dell, my co-host on Flea Market Fantasy, he's a huge fan of Frank Miller. What are your feelings about Frank Miller?
I really like Frank Miller. I think that his style lends to a lot of, like, maybe a little bit more on the darker side,
sure,
like the darker tone, a little bit more gritty. I mean, with Sin City and his run with Batman. I think that he's got a very unique style, and you can tell when it's him. And at times it felt a little out of place with Spider-Man, but then because he's kind of dealing with Doctor Strange and the whole like, weird, like mystical, magical side of the Marvel comics, I think he kind of fit for this issue.
Sure.
Especially when he starts going into, it's not the quantum realm, it's the...
yeah, what is it called? I'm not even sure what they call it, limbo or something. I'm not sure. But I think, well, the thing with me is that I tend to like artists like, are you really familiar with, like, say, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko?
Yeah.
Okay, because I would buy anything that Kirby drew. However, Steve Ditko, who I do like, it's taken me a long time to really get into him. And one of the things I don't like is I find his line work is a little bit too loose. And for me personally, I prefer, like, do you know Michael Golden?
Yes, I am familiar with.
Yeah,
with
Michael Golden to me is one of the best pencilers. Like, his figures are exaggerated and you could say cartoony, but he's in such control of his line. Like, even like a new modern day artist, like say Babs Tarr, she is such a good cartoonist. Like, it's just effortlessly perfect, right?
Right.
But when I look at, like, say this era of Frank Miller or Steve Ditko, I've always felt it was too loose for me. But I've also used to feel the same way about Will Eisner. Are you familiar with Will Eisner?
No, I think I'm a little less familiar with him.
Okay, definitely check out Will Eisner. He's one of the masters. But one of the things about him is that his pencils are very loose. But I've grown to really like him over the years. And so because of that, I think I'm starting to like Frank Miller more as well, because I think he's heavily influenced by Will Eisner. And as we go through this issue, there's a few really good panels I want to point out. And we're going to see examples of, I think, what I'm talking about. But so basically...
And I think that... Sorry, before we jump into the story, I think that I kind of got a little bit of Steve Ditko like flair to Frank's art in this issue. And I'm wondering if it's maybe just because it is Doctor Strange. And like
and Spider-Man, because he did Spider-Man too. Yeah.
But I mean, particularly like with those like weird like spheres with the tubes running through them, and like... the like fun, like bubbly kind of clouds and smoke that's kind of everywhere. It really had that classic Ditko feel to it. So
absolutely.
I kind of just fell right into this issue. I had a lot of fun with it because the art kind of just felt so familiar.
Sure.
So
and also I should point out that when I am talking about page numbers, I won't be able to refer to digital page numbers because I'm looking at the original here. Okay. So I'll just give you the actual page numbers, and hopefully it matches up with yours. But so basically, to be honest, like, do you want to summarize the story, because this thing's kind of complicated?
Yeah. So, there's a lot that kind of happens.
Give you the hard job.
So Dr. Doom kind of teams up with this kind of scientist guy to open up this portal to Dormammu, and Dormammu Dormammu teleports the scientist to him and gives him these powers. And they need this scientist to open up a door, and they use Stephen Strange as like the vessel to open up this creature, or whatever it is. They don't really even describe what it is. So after kidnapping Stephen Strange, essentially, to use him as a vessel to open up this Ben Sinister thing that they're trying to unlock, Spider-Man kind of gets this message sent to him, and he's supposed to go and track down Doctor Strange. And through there, he kind of battles this scientist and this robot that he's created, and in the end ends up freeing Doctor Strange and ending this ritual that's supposed to bring back this evil. That's pretty much the gist of it, without going into like too much detail.
Well, and then just to be clear...
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say there is a classic Denny O'Neil non-ending where
Yeah.
Spider-Man. I can't even explain what happens here, but basically,
Yeah, Spider-Man doesn't really have... Like, Doctor Strange kind of says thanks after being freed and
Right.
then leaves. But then you do kind of get a little bit of an epilogue with Doctor Strange.
yes.
Or, sorry, Doctor Doom. Forget
So it's more. It's not. I mean,
So-
Spider-Man's not even really the protagonist. It's not really a Spidey story. Like he's in
No.
it, but. So I think that the reason this one is so much better than the other issue. It's Frank Miller. Like.
Right.
No, and I'm not just saying his art is good. I mean, even though they don't give him credit for the plot, I'm gonna assume that he just added so much to this. It just made it that much more enjoyable to read.
Yeah.
Like if you just opening up right on like the on the first page, this kind of reminds me of there was a few issues ago where we saw something like this. It looks like almost like an old book or something.
Right. Yeah, I think the other one was like a fair, like a circus poster.
Right.
And this
Right,
one feels like an old fairy tale book. You open
Right.
it up to the first page, and it's like it has a little bit of a poem there before you jump into the story, and it's got these like almost like classic illustrations
Right.
on either side of Doctor Strange, and like this really bizarre spider version of Spider-Man. So it's pretty cool. So right away, it kind of grabs you, and it made me at least interested to kind of see where this was going to go.
And what's funny is, now that I'm thinking about it, most of the Frank Miller stuff I've seen, Sin City, Batman, Daredevil, it's all been sort of urban crime, thrillers or
Right.
whatever. I have never seen him do fantasy, and it's excellent. Like,
Yeah.
he's so at home, and I mean, like this castle with the lightning in the background, and, this big, like, underground, like, layer. It's just perfect. And obviously, I mean, Frank Miller is a master of design and layout and shadows, and it just, I mean, every page you could look at, there's just something, that sticks out. I think it's just great.
For sure.
I'm just sort of going through it now, like, let me see. There's a couple things here. Let me just find out. Oh, okay. On original page 9.
Okay.
Look at that amazing shot of Doctor Strange sitting under his infamously
under the
shaped
window?
Yeah. Oh my God.
So
I
great.
love that shot.
It is. It feels so. It feels classic. Like I don't know if I've actually ever seen this panel before, but it feels like I have. Like it feels just so at home looking at it. Like that is completely 100% Doctor Strange.
Yep.
So
And
it's great that the writing and the art kind of lends itself to each other. And they kind of, make this really fun story to read. And
Now,
so good.
Yeah, like now this is a double page spread, but if you look on the top of that double page spread, which is actually the next page, you see like the shot of like his what is it called? His
Sanctum Sanctorum.
Yeah, like you see like the water dripping off the ledge in front of it. That is to me absolutely Will Eisner. So just
Really?
like when you get done today, just Google Will Eisner the
Okay.
Spirit. Oh my God, that's absolutely something he would do. It's amazing, the texture and the perspective. Oh, I love it. And then flipping through, there's another one I wanted to mention. Okay, now I'll go to page 14.
Okay.
Okay, now you see all these shots of this is sort of like him sending like a psychic flare to try and get help, right? And it's zipping past all these buildings. Now, for all I know, those might be photographs that he's just sort of drawn over because they do look pretty realistic. But
Right.
you notice how on the fifth panel it ends up in that window? Like,
Yeah.
look at the shadow, eh?
Just so great.
It's totally Sin City-esque.
Yeah,
eh?
and the rain just like
Right.
dripping down the window and the lighting coming through. It's very good.
Yeah, like, and then like you go through the next few pages and there's just, oh my God, okay, go to page the original page 17. Okay. Look at this shot, this double page spread of Spider-Man.
Oh, it's so good. Like
It's perfect.
It's almost like a parallel to that classic Batman jumping off of the roof cover with the lightning
the
behind
Dark Knight
it.
Returns. You're right. Yeah.
It's so fun, and it's like an upshot of of New York as well. So all of the
Right.
buildings are kind of like this forced perspective pointing towards Spider-Man, and he's like
Good
right in
point.
the center of the panel with the lightning behind him, and the lighting is all red on him, and it's just
Right.
it's so great.
And also, I mean, Frank Miller's anatomy it's not really perfect, but here it looks great. Like with the how the behind the back of Spider-Man is all backlit, so it's all white. But then there's all the heavy shadows on like on the
Right.
underneath with all his muscles
his
and
foot
everything.
is like facing right towards the camera, quote unquote, and it's completely black because it's the thing that's completely facing away from light. It's just so great.
So good. And then if you look at the bottom, look at that weird shot of Spider-Man jumping down from like onto the street there. You see that?
Right.
The bottom left? Like and again, it's like just when you think there's no new way to draw Spider-Man, he goes and does it right there, you know?
Right. And a lot of the times it feels like the panel or the camera is kind of swooping along with Spider-Man. And there's a lot of action going on because it's kind of like it feels like almost like quick cuts. Because it's like panel after panel after panel of like him doing a bunch of different acrobatics and swinging. And then this one, the panel is almost completely still. And you see Spider-Man doing this action in the background. So those three panels consecutively, nothing moves in the panel besides Spider-Man bouncing in the background. And if there wasn't a reason, I'd find it odd. But it was done on purpose so that you can tell the story of the gargoyle actually being alive and moving.
Yes.
Because it would otherwise just be a very normal shot of like the gargoyle on the building with Spider-Man swinging through, and it's just really, really great.
Well, I
think was like one of my favorite parts of this issue.
Yeah.
That's so good.
He's obviously having fun and he's thinking it through, and he's just like what a great artist.
Yeah.
And then you get that final shot of Spider-Man on the building all in red, but like what a great shot, and the texture on those gargoyles,
Oh,
like the inking is so good. This is it's actually Tom Palmer. Are you familiar with Tom Palmer?
No, I don't think so.
He was the inker. I mean, nowadays he's kind of famous for doing he did Kick-Ass. He was the inker on Kick-Ass. Okay. But he had a really long run on Avengers and a few other books, but his inking, I mean, we talked about Klaus Janson, I think, recently, didn't we?
Yes.
No, okay, he's a great inker. He's perfect for Frank Miller, but I think Tom Palmer's right up there because he just gets the texture, just right. So good. Like I could talk about almost every page or
it's
something.
Very good. I mean, we'll talk about this briefly because we kind of went over the same exact thing. But if you go to page, I think it's going to be original 15.
Okay.
It'll be 15 for you, so digital 16.
Yep.
With the water tower bursting.
Oh my God! Yeah.
It's so good. So you can kind of see this like water tower just exploding as the gargoyles go through it, and then the next panel, Spider-Man like almost completely in the shadow, jumping up to face the gargoyles again. Like that.
Yep.
That panel with the gargoyles flying away from the panel and Spider-Man kind of just adjusting himself on that building is just so good.
Yep.
And then even going down to the next panel with like the shadow and the lighting that he used for Spider-Man is great.
Flawless. It's actually the original page 18.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, it says at the bottom 18, so but anyway. Okay. But anyway, like that shot of that water tower, that actually reminds me of a classic Steve Ditko Spider-Man cover. There was a classic cover where Spider-Man is dwarfed by the size of this giant water tower. It kind of reminds me of that. But yeah, like again, you want to talk about just the variety here. The water tower is giant in panel 1, and then in the next one, it's Spider-Man's dwarfed again, except now by the gargoyles, which in the previous panel were tiny, right? Mm-hmm. So the camera's kind of every angle is completely different. Right. It's telling the story. It's well designed. Yeah, like it's just this is one of the best. Honestly, it's one of the best like Bronze Age books I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's very good. It honestly might be my favorite one we've discussed.
Yeah.
Through Spider-Man or what we've done with
Quasar?
Quasar, yeah.
Now, what about the writing though? Like because it is still Denny O'Neil. I mean, sorry Denny, but I mean, do you
Yeah.
like the writing as much, or is it just? Do you think it's all Frank Miller, or what do you think it is?
I don't know. I think I think it is mostly the art and the storytelling through the art and the panels and the layout of how all the characters and the sets are.
Sure.
The story is pretty basic, I think. I don't think it's a bad story, but I think it's a pretty solid one.
Sure. Well, you know what? I mean, everyone in the world knows that even up until this day, people still look down on comics and don't take them seriously. But the truth is that no matter what you think about the writing in comics, the art has, to me, always been overall really good. There's always been great, really talented people working in comics, because the thing with writing is if you're a great writer and you want to make money, you're going to go into screenwriting or novels or whatever. Even theater probably pays more than comics.
Right.
But if you're like a really good, like if you're like a Frank Miller and you're a really good artist, I mean, really, you're going to work in either comic books or animation. But when you're an animator, you're part of a studio, right? Like you might be doing layouts, you might be directing, but there's going to be other guys that are drawing the rest of the episode or the scene. So it's not quite the same thing. This is the only way to really have control over everything and have, kind of have like that intimate relationship with the reader where you're controlling everything and they're only seeing what you put there.
Right.
So,
it does seem more of an intimate story, especially since there are a very limited number of people working on each issue.
Right.
With having some experience with animation, there's very large teams working on even just one episode of a TV show. But with comics, you can kind of really work with the writers and the penciler, because those are just two people. The whole issue is written by one person and is drawn by one person and inked by one person. So it does feel much more intimate and feels like you can kind of really nail down what you want from a story. So I think, again, that's why this one works, because it knows what it is, it knows what it wants to be. The art is very straightforward and tells the story rather than needing the dialogue to tell the story for you. Yes. So,
I think, you know what? I think you might have hit the nail on the head. Is it could be, Danny O'Neill's obviously an okay writer. He's fine. But maybe the problem is that, for example, with Alan Wise, since Alan Wise's storytelling isn't great, maybe he's sort of forced to write around that. And in this comic, he doesn't have to, because the art is so good. That could be it.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have to rely on bad dialogue to explain things and stuff.
Right. Yeah, because I think that this story is not really much different from most of the ones that we've read.
Sure.
Besides the few that were kind of lacking, this one seems like on par with the rest of the stories, but the art kind of just lends to it so well that I think it elevates it to a new level that some of the other ones just haven't been able to reach yet.
Sure. I wanted to point out another panel on page 25.
Okay.
There's an incredible shot of Spidey kind of propping himself up over this building that's got all these holes in the floors. You see that? Or is that Doctor Strange's? Yeah, it is. Oh, it's Doctor Strange's that's been destroyed. Okay, yeah.
Oh, okay.
His what is it? Sanctum
Sanctorum.
There you go. Sanctum Sanctorum. I should know this. I'm ashamed to admit that I really didn't start reading Doctor Strange comics until a couple years ago. But anyway.
Oh, okay.
But that shot
they're
is
interesting. Yeah, they can be really kind of out there, which is fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I read a handful of the Ditko stuff, and it's really good.
Yeah, anyway. Ditko's art for Strange is very classic and iconic for that character, for sure.
Absolutely, yep. So I'm just kind of flipping through the pages here. Again, not much to talk about with the story, because you know what actually is funny is that as I was going through, I was so focused on the story, but it's almost like I wasn't, or the art. I was focused on the art so much that it's almost like I wasn't really picking up what was going on in the dialogue. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I was reading it, but it was just like I was just so blown away by this art. Like even on page 30, this shot of Spider-Man swinging over top of whatever that thing is, that big arc.
The big archway, yeah.
Yeah,
and just the orange kind of lighting.
Yeah, the lighting and
Spider-Man is completely orange in this panel, and there's only 2 panels on the page. This page is literally divided in half.
Yep.
And the first one is very close up of Spider-Man swinging over top of this crowd, and then the next one is kind of a more close up on the crowd with Spider-Man swinging above them. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of telling this story, and there's a lot of a lot of thought bubbles on this page, and maybe it's really not that many, but because it's just divided up into 2 panels, it feels like it's a lot for each panel.
Sure.
But the art is just so good that I never got bored reading the dialogue.
Sure.
Throughout this throughout this page, so yeah, really good. And I will say too, I think that this one stuck a little bit closer to Peter Parker.
Sure.
With Deb and kind of canceling last minute on the rock concert that they're supposed to go to, and then having to end up going there anyways, and then running into this other girl that is kind of hitting on him, and Deb sees and kind of turns into this, again, second problem. There isn't enough going on. He's got to have girl trouble on top of that. So
I forgot about that scene because that was also well done too, because it was all in silhouette, right? Like you see, this is the band playing in the background and everything's going on in the foreground. It's just kind of a cool way to do it, right? Yeah. Because it kind of shows that it's kind of they can't really see, I'm assuming, perfectly because they're in a bar, but it's just it's a really well done scene.
Yeah, really.
And then even like the scene of them sitting in the coffee shop or whatever together, that again to me feels really Will Eisner-esque, and I don't know, it's just really good, really well done. Yeah. So go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say they have like the kind of far, the one panel is like a far shot of them sitting in the coffee shop window, and then the next one is still outside, but just kind of punched into them, and they're because it's nighttime and the coffee shop is open and has lights on, but it's dark outside. Again, it has this like fun dramatic lighting where they're lit from behind, so it's they could still have it in shadow, and then the next panel is him Peter Parker, and his spider senses going off, so he turns towards the light, and it jumps from like kind of casted in shadow to complete brightness when something urgent happens. And then the next page, again, goes back into the cast shadow. So it's just it's such good storytelling through the panel and through the lighting, especially. Yeah.
It's attention to detail. Like you're right. Like the next page with this marching this marching band kind of going through. Right. And Peter coming out, and just the way it's done. Yeah, it's almost like Watchmen, right? Where you're following one moment to the next. It's really well thought out. And then I love this shot at the bottom of Peter jumping into the air, and he's obviously halfway changing into Spider-Man. Like, that's so cool.
Very good. Yeah. So all in all, I think very good issue.
Yeah, I mean, for the art, I gotta say, I mean, what can you say? It's like 10 out of 10. It's amazing. Story not as good, but the package itself is much better than most of the other especially the Denny O'Neil comics that we've been reading.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, now we are going to move on to Myrtle Team-Up.
Myrtle Team-Up. All right, let's do it.
Spider-Man and the Black Widow. What a contrast. This is a bizarre
month.
Marvel Team-Up is a bizarre series. Like, I actually thought it felt like a Stephen Grant story, but it's actually Marv Wolfman on plot and Roger McKenzie on script. Roger McKenzie, who did some of the Captain America stories with Quasar. I don't know what to say about this.
So what's the difference between plot and script then?
Well, plot
is just kind of like the general idea, and then script is
like the plot is like the story beat. So you could have the plotter and the artist plot out the whole issue with no dialogue, and then the scripter could theoretically just go in and add all the speech, right? Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting way to do it. I'm not sure why. Maybe there was a deadline or something, but This is a weird issue. I gotta say, the art is by a guy I have never heard of.
I was gonna say, I don't think I've ever heard of him.
I can't even pronounce this, but Will Menya or something. It's Meugniot. I've never heard of this guy. This art,
I don't know, yeah.
Yeah, it's not terrible, but the vibe I get is that the way that he packs his art, like his figures and everything, into each panel, it feels more like a comedy style art, or I mean, and this is not an insult, but like a lot of indie artists sort of draw this way. Like it's not really a superhero style artist. Like, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I kind of get what you're saying. I did feel like something was a little bit off, and now that you're saying that, that does make sense. It does kind of have that feel to it.
Yeah. Again, not terrible art, but not really a focus on. Oh, geez, it's hard to explain. But yeah, like I think it's just the way that he packs the figures into the book, and his figures are really sort of bendy and kind of all over the place. It's a little bit more like a comedy book, but
they are a little bit more like elasticy and cartoony in this one.
Right, elasticy. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So
jumping right off, I honestly really enjoyed the first couple of pages. It kind of pulled me in because they just jumped right into it.
Sure.
And it didn't have to be this big thing that they had to set up, kind of peering into Peter Parker's life again, kind of reintroducing who he was. It jumped right into Black Widow spying on this, these group of agents, and Spider-Man coming in and helping her right away, and kind of having that banter back and forth. So you just kind of jump right into the action, which I kind of liked.
Well, to contrast, are you familiar with a writer named Brian Michael Bendis?
Yes.
Okay. I am not a fan of Brian Michael Bendis, and one of the reasons is, for example, I once reviewed a comic called Spider-Man, where Peter Parker teamed up with Miles Morales. And it took about 10 pages for them to finally meet up. But it's not like those 10 pages were filled with all this other plot going on. Right. It was just like what filler? You see. Yeah, it was filler. Like what you see here on this page 1 took 10 pages to get to in that comic. And it's so frustrating because it's just. In fact, I think it might have even been not until the last page of the issue, but I could be wrong about that. But yeah,
that's so weird. Like it feels like they maybe had somewhere they wanted to go but didn't know how to get there, so they were just kind of like, all right, let's, I guess, do whatever we can to kind of fill this in to get to what we want to do.
Yeah.
Which sucks. This one, it just, they want to have this fun, like, spy thriller kind of espionage story, and they just jump right into it. We kind of just learn what's happening along the way, and because the dialogue and the writing is pretty good, you can just jump right in and learn what's happening along the way and kind of catch up to the characters and to see what's going on.
I definitely felt like, to me, the writing is better than the typical Denny O'Neil story. I mean, Marv Wolfman's a decent writer, and Roger McKenzie's pretty decent. So this isn't bad. Again, I guess it does feel just like Stephen Grant's scripts. It feels a little bit outside of the main Spider-Man canon. Like it feels a little bit weird, but definitely enjoyable.
I want to point out on page 3 of the original, I really love the top 4 panels.
Sure, of the car driving, or the van.
So it's actually divided up into 4 panels, but those 4 panels next to each other, the entire cityscape is one continuous drawing, and within those 4 panels, you see Spider-Man jumping through them and seeing him kind of like his path along that winding bridge, with all the cars. I really thought that was a fun kind of clever way to show him traveling around in his direction, where the panels almost like it's almost as if like the camera is rotating and panning as Spider-Man is jumping through.
Sure.
So
Okay.
it was
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of fun. Yeah.
And again, it's like something they did in Watchmen, but the techniques were already around. It's just that Watchmen usually did them better.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, but you're right though. Like again, it's definitely not bad art. Like there's a really good panel at the bottom of the original page 5.
Okay.
Like that's a great shot of Spider-Man sort of like recoiling from the explosion or
right
pushing Black Widow. That's a great shot. So.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, yeah, I think the only thing that makes the biggest thing that makes the art weird is that it's like you said, it's like the anatomy's a little bit rubbery, and so it makes it feel a little bit inconsistent, whereas maybe it's a more seasoned artist would be really consistent with their anatomy and like proportions.
Right.
Everything would be perfect. And this is not perfect, but at least the artist is creative and taking chances. Like if you go to page 8 in the original, there's a really cool sequence where this bad guy is webbed up on the bridge, and it's just a cool way to, you show the close-up of the guy's face, then you zoom out a little bit, you zoom out a little bit more, and it's a very,
like cuts to like the entire shot, like wide shot of this bridge,
right?
Which is great. Yeah, I really like that.
Yeah, so at least it's creative, like it's a little bit like you can see his hand on the next panel. It's kind of wonky, but at least it's creative, So
right.
There's a funny line. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, speaking of rubbery, though, on page 7 of the original,
okay,
in the middle, all the way to the right,
okay,
there's this Spider-Man is really rubbery, and his whole body is so broken.
Yeah, what exactly is he doing there?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's he's in this like really weird pose where he's like It's almost a classic Spider-Man pose, except for if Spider-Man's back was broken.
Well, you know what? I'll give credit to one thing. At least the spider on his back is where it's supposed to be. Like
that's true.
I mean, yes, it looks like his back is broken, but at least it looks like it could exist in 3-dimensional space. You know? But there's a really weird line of dialogue I want to talk about on page 9, original page 9, when they've got the bad guys and they've webbed them up to this pole and they're swinging away. Of course, Black Widow swings too, I guess. I didn't realize that. But it's like, book him, Lieutenant. Dealing stolen property, arson, and murder 1. My pleasure. I've been after this punk for months. No, but I never took Spider-Man as someone that had that type of relationship with the cops where he could just, it's not like Batman, where Batman would kind of just leave criminals tied up somewhere and the cops would come and get him. I never got that vibe from Spider-Man. So I don't know if that's that Roger McKenzie's just not used to writing Spider-Man or what.
No,
but
normally he does leave them for the cops kind of tied up or webbed up onto a building or a telephone pole or something. But usually the police officers are still a little ticked that Spider-Man did that, right? So it is kind of weird. It is kind of weird to see them thanking him.
Totally. So yeah, it's a weird story. Like we end up running into the Owl, who actually had Wolverine's haircut and claws 20 years before Wolverine did. But kind of a weird character.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with this character.
Did you see the Daredevil TV show?
Yes.
He was actually in season 1.
Oh, okay.
But they're too cool to call him the Owl, so they used his like real name.
Oh, okay.
And he didn't look anything like the Owl or act like him, but yeah, that was the Owl. So yeah, not much. There's kind of a big fisticuffs at the end.
Yeah, it turns into this like just like crazy like gun show where there's like tons of firing and like I'll try. Oh, it's page 13 of the original.
Okay.
Well, I guess it kind of starts page 12 as well, but he swings into this building where this guy is tied up, and then every single door in this room, which is probably like there's probably like 10-20 doors open up, and 100 guys maybe pop out with guns and start firing.
Yeah.
And going like leading into page 13, that like those first 2 panels are just insane. There's so much going on, which kind of lends to what you're saying with it being a little bit cartoony and goofy. Right. I don't know.
And again, this is one of my pet peeves with panel layouts is how you have the top panel small, and then it's like a bigger panel that's overlaid with a smaller panel.
Right.
But because they cut the frame into the bigger panel, it just really throws off the composition.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's kind of awkward. And I mean, Spider-Man doesn't look right. The people don't look right. You know, just a really awkward panel. Yeah.
I'm curious too how much of that is like, did they have the panel set up beforehand in this instance, or did they have like this nice big large panel but then realize that they drew Spider-Man a little bit too far to the right, so then they just stuck a panel in the top left corner? Like, I wonder how that ends up happening.
Possible. Maybe.
Because I'm not familiar. Like, do you know? Like, I'm assuming the panels and art is kind of done at the same time.
Well, I mean, I drew comics when I was younger, but I'm not a professional. But ideally, you would plan out the page first, right? You would kind of
draw like thumbnail it.
Yeah, you would draw out your panels, and then you would thumbnail it, so at least you had like your rough layouts. But I mean, again, this artist, he's a decent artist, but he seems inexperienced. So for all we knew, he started drawing, you know, panel 1 without even knowing what was going to be in panel 2.
Yeah,
you know, it's possible. Yeah, pretty rough.
Yeah.
So yeah, it kind of peters out, and we get kind of a comedic ending where
Will just kind of shoots out of the building.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I'll try to save you boys a couple, but you took too long. It's like kind of an inconsequential story in the end, right?
And they even goof on the owl. Like, at the beginning, he is kind of this like menacing kind of presence, and then by the end of it, Spider-Man is like spinning him around in his chair, and he loses control and crashes through a building. And it really does feel like it's trying to be comedic in this moment. With the wide shot of him crashing through and like losing control, it just seems so goofy. And then with the last page, with what happens to his chair, and then with the shot of Black Widow, obviously meant to be funny. So clearly, kind of just an inconsequential, funny story. Not much to it. And again, one of those classic abrupt endings.
Yep, we're getting used to those, I gotta say.
Yeah, I guess so.
Well, let's see. What's next? What do we got here? Spectacular Spider-Man number 47.
Yes.
Is next. This is by Roger Stern and Marie Severin. So Roger Stern is our buddy. He's the guy who... Well, he's not actually our buddy, but he's the kind of the reason we're focusing on this era. He's our main man. Are you familiar with Marie Severin?
Sorry, what was that?
Are you familiar with Marie Severin?
Only in name.
Because she's actually the... I don't know if she's come up in the last... I'm mixing up... I've been reviewing so many comics lately, but she's actually the only woman from the original Marvel roster of artists. So she's been working with Marvel since the 60s.
Right.
And
I did know that. I'm actually not familiar with necessarily some of the runs that she's done.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know if she really had like a long... I think she did the Hulk. That was her one long-term series, yeah. But I definitely like... If I wouldn't have known it was her, my first instinct might be, oh, this is kind of like another typical... No, I don't want to say fill-in, but sort of a fill-in Spider-Man from this era. But the more I looked at it, the storytelling is really clear. It's just that the anatomy is not as maybe strong as some of the other artists that we've come across. But it's certainly decent art. And as far as the writing... Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Yep.
No, I was going to say, I think all in all, this issue was a pretty solid one. It, like, with the art, storytelling, the panels, like, I think all in all was pretty good.
I think, it's like we talked about all these regular features we were going to introduce, and we've kind of dropped the ball on all of them. But I think this was my favorite issue of the 4, because it felt like at this point it feels like Roger Stern, he's got a master plan, and it feels like every issue is very well thought out. And I don't know. I mean, that's obviously important. Like, even though towards the end it kind of just turns into a long fight scene, it seems like every step of that fight scene is, again, well thought out, right? Like, there's a different way that it's not just generic guys punching each other. It's like like it's step by step what happens, you know, and it's like, what is this obstacle? What's that obstacle? And so for that reason, I really like this issue.
Yeah, and you know what? I actually have a little bit of a soft spot for Prowler too, so I was also kind of excited to jump into this.
Is it just because of the movie or Spider-Verse?
It's Spider-Verse. I also do like Ultimate Spider-Man, and because of that, I went and read a lot of like about Prowler a couple years back when I started reading the Miles Morales Spider-Man.
Sure. See, I didn't even know he was. I never read really Ultimate Spider-Man, so I didn't know he was in it.
Right. Yeah, and it's a completely different Prowler.
Okay.
There's been, I believe, 3 Prowlers in the 616, and then Aaron Davis in Ultimate. I mean, there might have been more, but that's just what I know. There was Hobie Brown, which is the original Prowler. Yeah. And he kind of ends up being like a vigilante, good guy, bad guy, kind of flops back and forth. And then, the second one was this one that we're reading about now, where this, like, just random, like, thug, this cat burglar, steals the suit from Hobie
Brown.
Yeah. And then, again, it's stolen when he breaks his back or something like that, or his neck. So he's in the hospital for a really long time, and then this nurse steals it from him. So you really can't keep track of this Prowler suit.
Well, and it's funny because when I started reading Spider-Man in the late 80s, like I really, really getting into it, the Prowler was around, but I kind of thought he was always a regular. But even at this point, he hadn't been in Spider-Man since like the late 60s, I think, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of it's very cool that Roger Stern sort of dug back deep into, you know, the back issues and pulled this character out. So I thought that was really cool.
I think it was like late 60s, early 70s when Prowler first appeared.
Okay. Yeah, like late, like around number, I think they said 93 of Amazing was the last time he appeared. So whatever year that was, but no, I really did like this story. Again, like well paced, well thought out. The characters felt real. I just love the fact that he goes and again, it doesn't feel forced or rushed. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like, okay, let's go talk to Hobie Brown, find out what's been going on. Oh, sorry, I guess the Prowler did appear in Defenders. He actually appeared in that we reviewed this in Quasar Chronology, where a bunch of random superheroes show up to audition for the Defenders. I just didn't realize that he was one of them. Yeah. So, but anyway, towards the end of the story, we find out that it ties back into Roger Stern's first issue. Right. Because it brings back this character, what's her name? Belladonna? Mm-hmm. Is that it? Yeah, Belladonna. So that's pretty cool. We get a nice little, you know, excursion into Peter Parker's, you know, personal life with going to visit Aunt May, and that's fairly well done. It's not rushed, you know. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, overall, like I said, this issue is my favorite of the month.
Yeah, and I think the thing that for me pushes it over the edge for my favorite of this month is the cliffhanger. I love when there's like a really good cliffhanger.
Yes.
So yeah, this one definitely had a fun ending.
And the thing is I do like self-contained stories, but when it seems like Roger Stern's got everything kind of planned out. So you're right. I mean, like if he knows where he's going, then he knows exactly how to lead to it, and that makes for a strong ending, right? Exactly.
Yeah. If they have a story in mind and they know what they're going to tell and know the arc ahead of time, I almost always enjoy it because they have it really well planned out because it has to connect with itself, right? So right. I normally like these fun arcs that kind of span 2 or 3 issues when they are planned out and the same writer as well.
Sure.
Yeah, because I think our first Quasar chronology, it was supposed to be this overarching story with Captain America, but every issue was written by a different person.
Right.
So it felt so disjointed and like awful. Like it was just didn't connect at all.
And that's the thing is, like back in the 90s, like books like Batman and Superman, I mean, a lot of people have fond memories of those 90s Superman comics.
Mm-hmm.
But really what it was it was like a weekly comic, but every issue was written and drawn by a completely different team.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, there was some coordination, but it's just never going to be the same if you're jumping back and forth between writers and artists, right? Mm-hmm. It's just impossible. So, yeah, I mean, there's nothing better than someone just having control over everything.
Right.
You know, I also can't really pinpoint, like, all the dialogue is good, but, like, there's just a subtle quality to Roger Stern's dialogue. Like, when Spider-Man, it's on the last page, when Spider-Man says, "Lady, I have to ask why. Why go to all this trouble to stop me?" And she just casually says, "Because I don't like you. You interfere with my plans, and you're too unpredictable, too strange." Like, it just, you know, it's just, I think you'll notice that later. Like, his characters are really matter of fact, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I really like that. But yeah, overall the whole issue was good, and it's like you're going through the issue, and the art is packed, and the dialogue's packed, but it never feels like you're just wasting time. It all feels strong, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I agree.
So okay, how about that? So we kind of gave our favorite issue for the month. What's your favorite cover for the month?
Ooh, favorite cover. Oh, I didn't think about that. You know, I think maybe it was the annual.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it was like, it was pretty unique compared to all of the other ones. You have some like fun lighting, Doctor Doom in the background, kind of in this like green and yellow like particle effect almost.
Right.
And this like gem kind of right front center with Doctor Strange kind of pinned to it. It's a fun cover.
Absolutely, that's the one that stands out. Like, to be honest, like this cover, it's sort of just popped up in other places, and I've never seen the other one. So this is, but yeah, absolutely my favorite cover of the month.
I mean, even down to like the caption at the bottom: Spidey and Doctor Strange, Spidey and Doctor Strange versus Doctor Doom and the dreaded Dormammu. Nuff said.
Yeah, yep.
So good.
Love it.
Yeah.
You know what else? I got to point out something. This is an interesting little tidbit here. So we've got 4 Spider-Man books, okay?
Mm-hmm.
One of them's called Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, which was later changed to Spectacular Spider-Man, okay? Mm-hmm. Then it gets confusing because then later on there was a book called Spider-Man by Todd McFarlane. Then they changed the title of that one to Peter Parker, Spider-Man, okay? But at this point in Spider-Man's history, the book was called Amazing Spider-Man. It was called Amazing Spider-Man, but did you notice here on the cover what it says? It just says Spider-Man.
Oh yeah, I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, and the thing is people tend to use the short form like Amazing when they talk about this book, or like Uncanny when they talk about Uncanny X-Men. Mm-hmm. But usually in the indicia at this point, X-Men was just called X-Men, and for a long time, Amazing Spider-Man I think was just called Spider-Man. And I would prefer that Marvel just drop the adjectives, and they just called it all. Like, I wish Spider-Man was just Spider-Man, Avengers was just Avengers. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think that I don't know. I think maybe because it's just always been that way. It feels like it fits. But I guess thinking about it, like without that in mind, it would make more sense to just have the character name, or kind of just drop that adjective. But having multiple issues of Spider-Man coming out each month, it does make sense
to just keep Amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you do have Amazing and Spectacular and the Team-Up all coming. I mean, I guess the Team-Up doesn't really count. But if you have 3 different Spider-Man stories coming out each month, you have to have something to distinguish them and keep them different, because the amazing like for example, the Spectacular Spider-Man is going to be is a cliffhanger. It's going to be connecting to the next issue. But if it was just Spider-Man, you might, confuse them. Yeah.
This keeps me up at night. But anyway. Okay. So that wraps up this episode.
Yeah.
So that wraps up, what month was that? That was
October.
October 1980. Next month we're going to do November 1980, and we're going to be covering Amazing Spider-Man 210 with Madame Web, or Madam Web.
Madam Web.
Yeah, Marvel Team-Up Annual number 3. Once again, no Spider-Man in sight. It's the Hulk teamed up with Power Man and Iron Fist.
Which is always a fun duo.
Yes, and then Marvel Team-Up 99 with Spider-Man and Machine Man. And then Peter Parker number 48 with a character I've never heard of, so I won't even mention who it is. But anyway, yeah, so you can take it from here, Josh.
All right. So I guess so that's it for Here Comes the Spider-Cast. Tune in next week where we talk about November of 1980. Is there anything else you want to say before we sign off?
No, just to I'm not sure where you're listening to us, but we do have the website comicbooksyndicate.com. We've got the Facebook page. We've got a YouTube channel, and then hopefully soon we'll be on iTunes and Spotify and all that fun stuff.
Right.
So
the Comic Book Syndicate is also on Twitter as well.
Yes.
At Comic Syndicate.
Yep.
So if you want to follow the Comic Book Syndicate there, it'd be really cool to kind of get some feedback from you. You guys can tweet at us and let us know what you thought of the issues and what you thought of the podcast. We'd love to hear some feedback and continue the conversation.
Absolutely. Let us know what you thought of the comics themselves, and let us know what you think of our reviews, please. And that's about it. Tell everybody you know all about us, and we're looking forward to hearing from everybody. And we'll see you again next Monday on Here Comes the Spider-Cast.
All right. See you later.